Hi, I'm Steve Postell, and I'm here today to talk about Albion amps. I've been using these amps for 3 or 4 months now, and I love playing them, I love recording with them, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I like about it and how I use it. So different people have different needs for different kinds of amps and different situations. If I take one amp somewhere, I want something that gives me a lot of different colors, as opposed to one sound, and some particularly older amps have one great sound, but I really like the flexibility both live and in the studio. And this amp, particularly this 50 watt amp of theirs, has just a lot of different places you can take it tonally. So the first thing I look for in an amp is the clean sound, because ultimately I have pedals, I can get other sounds, but that clean sound is really the key to whether I'm going to work with an amp or not. And the first thing I look for in the clean sound is whether the high end, the high notes, the treble is harsh. A lot of amps it is. What I found in the Albion is that the clean sound, the high end, is very clear, crystalline, but doesn't hurt your ears. So that's the first thing I listen to on this amp, is that I can get high notes or even a rhythm part, and it's not piercing to me, and yet I can hear it's very clear, I can hear all the tone. So that's one thing that I like a lot. I'll show you in a minute all the different variations we can get. This is pretty much the straight tone of the amp. Some amps, the second channel is usable, some it's not. I'm not a heavy metal type of player, so I don't need full Marshall-y saturation, although it's nice to be able to have it if you're in the studio. So I check the second channel and see if I can get a nice warm overdrive sound. So that's a real punchy sound. It's got a lot of bottom, but again, just like you don't want the top to be too harsh, if that bottom is too muddy, it also doesn't work. So I like that I can dial in a nice distortion sound that does not overwhelm the bottom of the band or the track. Now this amp particularly has a third feature which I've never seen on an amp, and I end up using it quite a bit. So it has our A channel and our B channel. The A channel, which is clean, and the B channel, which is an overdrive. And that overdrive channel goes from full-on metal distortion to just slightly overdriven. So I'm going to put it somewhere in between for me. But often I want something that's somewhere between the two. I want a clean sound, and then I want to just be able to kick it up a little bit. And this amp offers something called a mix channel. And that's a channel that's basically the clean channel, and you dial in as much of the overdrive as you want. It's a great feature. I was playing on a session the other day, and I used it. The part went from sort of the same part in the verse to the choruses, so what I wanted to do is just kick it up a little bit and saturate it. I threw something like this. So that's really nice to be able to, for a chorus or just to get a little change in sound without going full-on distortion. So that's another feature, again, that's on the 50 and 100 watt that I really dig, and I haven't seen it. It's on none of my other amps. Now, so I have this set pretty much straight up, but there's a lot of little tweaking you can do on this amp depending on your guitar. Every guitar, the pickups, whether you're using single coil, humbucker, or whatever. And this gives you some flexibility, so I'm going to show you some of that that's offered on these amps. So let me show you some of the things the amp does. As I said before, there are a lot of little colorations and variations that you can use on this amp. So we'll go from left to right. Obviously we have our power switch and our standby. Then we have a nice feature here, which is 100% and 33% of the output of the amp. So if you're in a situation, a small club, or an amp, or a microphone that might be overdriving in a studio, you can kick this down to 33% of the output, which is a really nice feature to have. Again, it's like having a small amp and a bigger amp in one. Then there's a phase switch, and there's really two ways that this could come in real handy. One is if you're using two cabinets, and you can play with that and see which one sounds best, because they can cancel each other out or have some phase issues. And even just room to room, as you're going gig to gig on a tour, you can experiment with that. Sometimes there's phase issues with the wall, with the speakers, and so on. All right, now one of the things I also really like about this amp is that there's total separation between the tone controls for channel A and B. A lot of amps have two channels, but they share the same EQ. So this is really handy. You can really find where you want it on each channel. That's a really nice thing. Then there's a tight switch right here. It says tight and loose. And some of these, you know, the words tight and loose might mean something to you or not. I think of it as cabinet, as sort of a sound. So if I have it loose, there's more of sort of the low frequencies and the high frequencies swimming around a little bit, which is nice. But depending on your guitar, your situation, if that was too much or getting in the way of maybe the keyboard player or whatever, you can tighten that sound up a little bit. Again, real nice to have. Every guitar is going to hit this amp differently, every situation, every room. So all of these little tonal controls are really helpful. And we move over here. There's a really cool button which took me a while to figure out what it was doing. It's called Shift, and basically I almost always dial out a little mid when I'm playing, because it's a place in the guitar that can sort of add a little bit too much muddiness. Not all the time, but that's a frequent problem, especially recording. And basically the Shift does that in a very subtle way. It's not as aggressive as turning down a mid-range. So if I'm playing, I can hit that Shift button and it brings out some of those sort of low-mid frequencies if that's what you're looking for. Then I have to the right of that a smooth button, and this would come in handy if you wanted to knock off some of the harsher sounds. Maybe you're playing a telly that's just a little bit too bright. So let's say I go to my treble pickup, and I hit that smooth, I still have a high sound. But it's a little less of that aggressiveness on the top end, and even if it's just playing chords. And I hit that in. Just what it says. It smooths it out and takes some of the pointedness off of it. Then there's another, in addition to the other one, which is globally over the whole amp, there's a tight switch for this channel, and that does the same thing as the other one does. It kind of hears it when it's fully open. And I can tighten that sound up. So there's less stuff swimming around. So let's say I have a chorus pedal on, which itself adds some swimming tonality. I might really want that in. So if I hit that tight switch, so there's a lot of different ways in the studio. You can walk up to your amp and tweak it, but depending on what guitar you're going to play that night, and both channels have all of these switches. So that's a really great feature of this amp, that especially because I have a lot of guitars. This is a Jarrell guitar I'm playing today that has switchable humbucker and single coil pickups, but it has tonal qualities, and I take this guitar and really set this amp up, both channels, just for this guitar if I'm playing this guitar, and I could do the same thing if I was playing a Strat or anything else. So again, one of the reasons that I'm digging this amp is that it's clean, there aren't frequencies running away. If there are, I have different ways. Of course, my standard just tone controls, but I have all these little notching filter kind of things that I can deal with, and I can really dial in the sound that I want for any particular given situation. So thanks for listening. I'm Steve Postell. This is my new pal, my Albion amp, and I'm sure if you check one out, you're going to dig it. See you next time.